Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today, Norfolk Southern's CEO and President Alan Shaw testified in front of Congress. He was there in front of the U.S. Senate. The Environment and Public Works Committee held a little shindig. And in honor of Alan Shaw's testimony, Norfolk Southern derailed another train. That's not a joke. It actually happened. Another train derailed in Alabama this time, about 37 cars derailed. None, as we know, hazardous. I guess a couple had some residual hazmat in it, but not East Palestine. Now, here's the thing. The question is well, a couple hours earlier, there was one that derailed, and CSX, wanted to get in on the fun and the honor, if you will. They derailed a train in West Virginia with diesel fuel and oil leaking into, one of America's oldest rivers, also part of the National Park Service. So thank you, CSX. Now, the thing is you go, was this really in honor of the testimony? Did they do this on purpose? Or is this just another day in America where we don't have the oversight, the safety precautions, the things that we need to make sure that our trains are running safely, and we're just now paying attention of it? Because we've been told for years, rail, it's the safest way to get things. The trucks are not as safe. Put things on rail, going to be much safer. And it is when you do it right. And you go, well, how do we do it right? Well, we do it right by having skilled, trained people doing their jobs, ensuring that safety is at the front of all this. And I know everyone talks about safety. Everybody who's ever worked in this environment knows safety is just safety. But get the job done as fast as you can. Do it faster, safely though. Do it even faster than that, but safely though. And today, interestingly enough, I got an email from a listener who is a railroader, and he said, "Look, it's 1:00 in the morning. I'm heading out, to make my run, and we're listening to the radio chatter, and the radio chatter is, hey, there's a problem, and miraculously, it must have been just a handbrake that was, it wasn't bearings or wasn't brakes or there wasn't anything else. It was just something really simple." Now, he said it's a negative 10 degrees where he is. It's freaking cold. Could it be that the workers are just like, hey, or could it be that the boss was like, hey, just get it down the road. We're behind. We got to get going. We've got a quota to meet. And this is what happens when you have monopolies and robber barons who demand more. Their insatiable appetite for more never ends. And we see this movie over and over and over again. There's nothing new here. When you consolidate down to the point to where only a handful of companies or a handful of entities have the power to do whatever the freak they want, what you get are, further down the chain you are on that level of importance, the more danger you get. So if you're the worker on that job, it's going to be dangerous. But if you're the community that work is being done in, you're probably in the worst of all situations. And this is where, again, you need government. You need informed, educated, active citizens engaging in their government to say, hey, this is what we want. And this is one of those issues, should not be partisan. No. Bomb trains don't know red hat, blue hat. They didn't get that because they certainly can't do red light, green light. So this is one of those moments where we go, maybe we think about going back to the public square and hashing out our problems. And the answer to that is not right now. It's not going to happen because we seem hell-bent on returning to the good old days. The good old days of the 80s and 90s and not the 1980s and 90s. And I point to this story of Elon Musk. Elon. Evidently, Elon is planning to build I don't know how quite to put this. The story reads, Elon Musk is planning to build his own town on part of the thousands of acres of newly purchased pasture and farmland outside of Texas, the Texas capital, according to deed and other land records and people familiar with the project. The idea, evidently, is a utopia, a Texas utopia along the Colorado River, where his employees can live and work and work and work. And did I mention work? Yeah, and work more. Yeah, they could live and work. You know, kind of a utopia, right? And immediately my mind starts to go to funny places. Like, well, gee, what would he call it? Would it be, Muscatucky? Are we, Stinky Town? I don't know. Is this Muskistan? A lot of people liked Muskville. Doesn't matter what it is. Elonville? Muscatuckistan? I don't know. But if you want to know what it's going to look like, I think we kind of have I think we've already got a really good live living model. An Elon Musk statue on every corner, and you're ousted if you don't pay homage. I think North Korea is kind of the place that, Elonistan would look a lot like. Because you look at the fact that his Twitter impressions went down and he fired an engineer. People weren't looking at his mean tweets, so he fired someone. Can you imagine? Come with me, if you will. Can you imagine the soft ego because, hey, my impressions are down. People got to go. Heads will roll. Can you imagine now if your entire existence is based on this one guy? Can you imagine a world where one person controls the whole town? Can you imagine? Can you imagine such a place where they controlled your job, where they controlled the education system, where they controlled the health care, where they controlled all of the commerce? Can you imagine a place? Could you ever imagine such a place existing? In America, could you ever imagine a place where all of your life's decisions were decided by one guy? Who would think such a place could ever exist? Oh yeah, our history. That's right. Oops, I forgot. For my listeners in Chicago, Pullman Town. George Pullman, the Pullman car. Back in the 1894 when the Depression hit back then. He cut everybody's wages, he cut everybody's hours, did all kinds of draconian things to this utopia he had built. Company town, where you paid your rent to the company, you paid your grocery bill to the company, you paid your kids' education to the company, you paid your grocery bill, you name everything. Everything went to Pullman. So when things got a little rough in the economy and Pullman needed a little extra cheese on his Whopper, what did he do? He took it out on the workers. And is that surprising? Of course not. We've seen it throughout history, right not far from where I live. The sweetest place on earth. It's what they build themselves, the sweetest place on earth, Hershey chocolate. Who doesn't love Hershey's chocolate? But Milton Hershey wasn't blankety blank blank blank. His workers once had the audacity, the year 1937, come back with me in the Wayback Machine. They had the audacity to say, we'd like better wages, hours, conditions. We'd like to be treated better. How dare they? How dare they? When they went on strike, well, they brought in thugs from New York and they gave them bats, axe handles, whatever they could grab from the Hershey planing mill, because again, everything in the town was owned by Milton Hershey. So everything fed into this system of got to make the chocolate. All the people were dependent on the company town, their housing, their everything. So when these people had the audacity to go, we want better, he was butthurt. He really was. He was pretty unhappy. Little chafe back there, and gave these thugs from New York bats to beat the living tar out of these workers. He broke the strike by breaking arms and legs. That's the history of these company towns. Steinway Village in New York, another one of those perfect examples. The Steinway piano, back in the 1850s was the big thing. They decided, those socialists and communists, they want workers to make a living wage. Well, we're going to get away from them. We're going to move out to Astoria, Queens. We're going to move away. We're going to have our little company town so that those agitators can't come. And we can exploit labor just like we want. This isn't new, folks. Nothing new. You think about one of the first company towns, 1820. You had this Francis Cabot Lowell. Goes over to England. A merchant from Boston goes over to England because he wants to learn how to do textile manufacturing. So he memorizes and steals all of their technology because that's what we do well, and goes back and goes, hey, how can we recreate the horrible that's over there here? And it was the beginning of the town of Lowell, Massachusetts, where eventually you saw the Bread and Roses strike. But, in the 1820s, you had this rise of this town, and the founders of this town were like, hey, we should go out into the rural areas and find us some youngins, some young single women, bring them into town, make them live in these boarding houses that we own, and of course, make them attend church and lead a moral life. Control. That sounds familiar. Let's take a look at some red states. And, the bell rings, 4:30 in the morning, get your behind into the mill and work 12, 14, 16 hours a day until you die in your mid-20s and late 30s. Until you start spitting the brown lung from all of the dust from the looms, which led to the 1912 strike. Bread, yes, but roses too. The idea that our work should make better lives. And I could give you hundreds of examples across this country of robber barons, of the benevolent dictators in every community who said, I know how to do things. The Elon Musks of their era. He's not new. Over the late summer, in October, we did a Working Class Heroes radio tour. We met a lot of folks on the road, and it was an amazing time. We stopped in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and again, a company town, but it was in the mining industry, and the mining industry was one of the worst. It's one of the most widely known kind of company town environments, to where you worked in the mining industry, you worked for the mine, you got your tools from the company store, you got your health care from the company doctor, you got your food from the company store, everything. In fact, you didn't even have money. So you didn't have the opportunity to go, well, I'm going to go across the street where somebody else might own a store and use money. No, you use script. So I started thinking about, in Elonville, will we have to start using Tesla dollars or something? I mean, is this the future? When we give these gazillionaires the ability to create these metropolises in their image, is this where we head? Because again, it always comes with a moral compass. Always. I look at that guy who owned Domino's. I don't remember his name. I just heard the story. I think he started that's right, Ave Maria, Florida. Good Catholic town, Catholic university, all private, moral code. This stuff scares me, especially as you have this move by our political leaders funded by these people to break up our public schools, to break up the one thing that we, the people, control. And they want to put it into private hands. They want to create, and you listen to Marjorie Trainwreck Green and her, we need a national divorce. She's not talking about breaking up states. She's talking about segmenting off, little Elonvilles. And then you got to then start to wonder, when Elon gets his dream town, are you allowed to drive through it? Do you need a passport? Can you get out after dark? And security. If you live in the company town, would China be jealous of the security protocols that are in place and the behavior codes and the point systems? I mean, when I look at someone like Musk saying, and now look, Bezos has been doing the same thing. This is not new. And this is the reason I think it's important for working people to realize we're the marks in this game. We're not part of the grand scheme. We're the marks. We're the pawns. We're the people who are going to be used and abused and misused. We're the ones who are going to show up in the factories and work to live in that factory or in that Twitter place or wherever. We're going to be the ones who are going to be doing all the dirty laundry. And our children will grow up in that environment thinking that's normal. I think back to a guy that I met right when I first moved to Pennsylvania. He said when he got back from Vietnam, they had given him a bit of money. And he used that money when he got out of the service to pay off his family debt to the company store, because it was that was the first time in his bloodline in this country that their family wasn't in debt to this company. Now this is going back to the early 70s. The fact that kind of thing existed, and it's going to exist again, because we're not learning the history of what. And I'll tell you, the working conditions in those mines, in the looms, in these places, in the Hershey chocolate factory of the old, these were not hospitable places for working people. This was drudgery. Life was brutish and short. And for working people, that's what they want. So for me, seeing Elon go, he wants his own town, I'm not in favor of it. It's a bad idea, but I know why they're going there. So we can have our values. Want to hear your thoughts. It's a good idea. Should Elon be able to have his own town and enforce his narrow views? And would you move there? That's the other part. But if you needed the job, would you? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
The reason I bring up Elonville or Muscatania or whatever you want to call it is because the question that becomes, what kind of a world do we as working people want to live in? Do we want to live in a world where you have the kind of outweighted power in the hands of some egomaniacal nitwit like Musk? I mean, seriously. I mean, and this is, he went from everyone loved him because, he was creating jobs, had a vision for the future. And I'm leery of this guy because he's not the one creating this stuff. He's the guy hiring people who know how to do this. And look, that's great. You need people with vision. But he's turned, well, like any benevolent dictator. As long as you're kissing his behind and bowing and kissing the ring and as long as you're doing all that, things are rainbows and unicorns and sunshine. The second you get off that we love you kick, as soon as you start questioning, as soon as you start saying, hey, maybe this isn't such a great idea. Oh, how that changes. Oh, how that turns. And speaking of rainbows and sunshine, because you had to know there was something that was going to take you from rainbows and sunshine to rainbows and sunshine. Tennessee Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally. Randy McNally. Evidently, he has an official Instagram account. And evidently, on that official Instagram account, the lieutenant governor, the Republican lieutenant governor of Tennessee, a state that is banning drag shows and passing all kinds of anti-LGBTQ stuff and all this, because we need to protect the children. Evidently, he has repeatedly commented on the nearly naked photos of a 20-year-old gay man, who is, again, almost naked, and one of them, hearts emojis, fire emojis, and I guess on one said, "You could turn a rainy day into rainbows and sunshine." Now, here's the thing. This person who posted these photos is 20 years old. So he's not a child. So you can go, well, he's just a consenting adults. And look, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with consenting adults. But don't be a freaking hypocrite about it. And this is, again, my problem with Elanistan. Here's the thing. How many kids does Elon have with workers that he used to work for his company, like a gazillion? How many times have you seen, oh, well, he's got, we don't even know how many kids are out there of former workers. You go back to the Lowell, Massachusetts story. The fact that, you had the founders going out into the poor areas and bringing these young, attractive women or men, if that's your direction, into the fold, because we care about their moral compass and their moral values. Moreover, they want to corrupt them. This reeks of all of that. And for me, it's the hypocrisy. Look, I'm a believer of, do your own thing, and I have been my whole life. Or as my daughter says, you do you. I may not agree with what you do, and I don't have to. I may not like what you do. Doesn't matter. As long as I don't have to do it, great. But we do have to somehow be respectful of each other. Because, look, I'm sure that there are things that I do that people aren't thrilled with. You should look at my email inbox. And again, all hateful emails go right to the top. I think I have that written in code, rick@thericksmithshow.com. So please, those right to the top. But it's this hypocrisy. We're going to point our finger at somebody and say, you're something wrong with you. While simultaneously, very quietly, and I don't know, does this guy think that he's the lieutenant freaking governor. Does he think nobody is paying attention to him putting heart emojis and fire emojis on a gay man's nearly naked pictures and saying you could turn my rainy day into rainbows and sunshine? Really? Wow. I'm going to go with wow. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1910. That was the day miners in Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania, struck for union recognition and the 8-hour workday. They hoped to beat back deep wage cuts and out-of-pocket costs for safety equipment and explosives. As many as 15,000 miners went on strike against 65 mines. Thousands were immediately evicted from company housing. The UMWA helped to set up tent cities. Area coal companies imported immigrant strikebreakers who had little understanding of English or why they were being hired. When they tried to quit and leave company housing, coal company police beat them back to work, refusing to let them leave until they paid the cost of relocation. The situation was so bad that the House Committee on Labor held hearings as to whether workers were being forced into peonage. Injunctions were enforced against strikers picketing on public property near the mines. Many were arrested for simply traveling along public roads. Strikers were also denied access to many municipal services whose facilities were on coal company property. Hundreds of strikers were arrested for trespassing and their leaders held on charges of conspiracy and intimidation. They were routinely harassed, beaten, and fired upon by sheriff's deputies, state troops, and the coal and iron police. Over the course of the strike, more than a dozen strikers and their family members were killed at the hands of security and police forces. The strike wore on through the brutal winter of 1910-1911. Hunger and disease spread throughout the tent cities. After 15 months, the UMWA called off the strike. The union was broke from disbursement of strike funds, and many blacklisted strikers had to leave the state to find work. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Obviously, the main social problem in America is that black people run everything, and us white folks as a group just can't get a fair break, right? So says Texas Governor Greg Abbott. As a lifelong white Texan, I can't tell you how amazing it is to see our governor come out unapologetically for a return to the old-time institutional bigotry. Absolutely freaking amazing. Apparently, Abbott fantasizes that hordes of black people are seizing control of our government, universities, banks, media, and other power centers, shoving aside more qualified and entitled whites. Going from fantasy to hallucination, he concludes that this takeover is caused by corporate and government hiring policies that bolster diversity and inclusiveness in our society. Even attempting to implement this democratic goal, he barks, is illegal because, get this, it violates federal law against discrimination. Yes, in Greg world, fighting discrimination against minorities discriminates against the white majority. So, Abbott has actually issued an edict directing state agencies and universities to shut down all hiring programs that include diversity goals. His official injunction declares that deliberately trying to stop excluding minorities leads to, quote, the alienation of individuals from the workplace. He means, of course, that some white people are alienated, that non-white people are getting job opportunities. Never mind that minorities routinely suffer extreme alienation from the workplace, i.e., exclusion. Abbott's attack on diversity also includes more exclusion of women, people with disabilities, LGBTQ people, veterans. Give him credit. He's an equal opportunity abuser. This is Jim Hightower saying Abbott and his right-wing ilk should realize that the price of creating an exclusive society with no diversity is that they would then be stuck living with people like themselves.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So this is one of those things that never ceases to amaze me. We didn't learn from Sarah Palin, evidently. You may remember when Sarah Palin was big on the abstinence-only thing. We shouldn't be teaching sex ed at all in schools. It's bad. It's abstinence only. And then her kids went out and pumped out, a bunch of units, proving that abstinence only works so well. Now we have the new Sarah Palin, new and somehow dumber. Lauren Boebert evidently is going to be a grandma at 36. Yeah, evidently her 17-year-old son knocked up his girlfriend. And she let this news out after she had ranted about how we should end comprehensive sex education in schools. Yeah, she did that. Here to share some thoughts on, can it get any worse? Can it get any dumber? Our good friend Sarah Burris, reporter at Raw Story, rawstory.com, the website. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
That's how I know that if there's a God, that she's got a sense of humor.
No, this is one of those
Right?
things. You go. You just. I guess. Yeah. I guess.
Because really, there is no good reason to just sort of smack somebody down that quickly. Can you imagine like her son just being like, "Oh, mom, you may not want to say that publicly because turns out my girlfriend's preggers. PG, like she's not in a movie." So yeah, but it's interesting. There are lots and lots and lots of statistics about this, about abstinence only being the worst thing.
Yep.
For schools. Even whenever it comes to there was that whole, purity ball thing where kids danced with their dads and pledged to be married to them until they handed them over or something.
Little creepy.
And to wear rings. Right. Like, and it was like a really big thing. Abstinence only pledges basically delayed sexual activity for like 6 months, I think is what they found on average.
I was gonna say 6 minutes would have been, yeah, okay. Well, 6 months, yeah.
Right. My favorite thing in the world was in Kansas. This was years and years ago. A friend of mine was working for a women's pack, and she managed to convince a Republican female to carry a bill that was called Abstinence Plus, and it was everything but.
no, in that vein, abstinence plus. So as I was looking at this story today, because it gave a great opportunity as I was sitting there with my 16-year-old son to go, look at this moron.
Wrap it up.
Look at this moron. Here's what I'm saying you. Don't do it. Don't do it. But if you do, put a hat on your Jimmy. But don't do it being the first part. You're not ready. You're not financially ready. You're not, physically ready. You're not emotionally ready. You're not ready. Don't do it. But if you do, put a hat on your Jimmy. How hard is that?
I mean, my comment has been, hey, there's a box.
How difficult is that?
How narf. There's a value pack under the sink, right?
And I did. I gave absolutely. I gave him that already.
We like variety in this house. I've been telling my cousins, both of which can't even drive yet. I'm just like, look, I'm not saying you have to like abstain or whatever. If you need a condom, you let me know. I will send them to you via Amazon. Nobody will know. You're good. Because it's like, the sad thing is everybody's like, if you're not mature enough to buy your own condoms, then you're not mature enough to have sex. And it's like, oh, I wish that was the case. Yeah. I wish that's how that works. But
that's said by dumb people who knock somebody up at 17 or 16 or 17. Oh, look at Bobo.
Right. And the thing is like, yes, the pregnancy thing is a big deal, but like we're talking about AIDS. Like we're talking about, HPV, which leads to cervical cancer. Like this is not just about being saddled with, somebody on your hip for 18 years. This is also death.
Yeah, that went south. That
right.
was funny
Sorry.
for a
I'm
second.
so sorry.
And now you just, that was a downer.
I know.
I do think her kid did, slap her where she belonged. Because, she said, something along the lines, you made me a grandmother at 16. And the kid goes, yeah, like you did to your mother. Ah!
Oh, well played. Bravo.
Yeah, bravo.
These are the values that we learn from our parents.
Let's hope stupidity obvious is hereditary. Let's hope bad parenting isn't. Let's move along. Some news on the Trump front. Possible indictment. We've been talking about possible indictments for like 6 years now. Are we any closer to possible indictments?
What was different today is the New York Times story that they posted basically got a leak from somebody in the New York DA's office that's saying, here are the charges we're looking at. And some of these, just based on what some of the legal nerds have been saying, and that was the last story of the night that I posted, was just sort of following up some people who actually know what this stuff is. Some of the legal nerds are like, yeah, this one's a little stupid, but there's like 5 other charges in here that's going to stick. So there's like some election fraud, whatnot. And they're just like, okay, that's a little silly. But when you're talking about like campaign finance fraud and falsification of business records and like stuff like that. Like there really is a paper trail for that. That's what Michael Cohen basically just said. Here's a giant box of all of the evidence you need, and let's talk about this 19 times. So, you know, they've got the goods. They've got the receipts.
I'm going to make the prediction he never sees the inside of a jail cell. Never.
Maybe not. It may be just a hefty fine, but if he's accused of a felony, then again, like, doesn't that preclude him from
Not
serving?
accused. He can still run if he's accused.
Well, if he's convicted of a felony.
No, if he's convicted, do you think that's going to happen before 2024 with the amount of lawyers that he can afford to postpone and delay and paper people? Everyone keeps saying, oh, he's not going to be able to run. He's going to run. He's going to be able to run because our legal system is fraught with ability to delay and stall and push off. Look, I look at Eric Holder. They wanted Eric Holder to testify. They subpoenaed him in front of Congress. 7 years later, he still didn't do it. We have the rich people and the elites have a way to get away with stuff that the rest of us don't. I see he doesn't see the inside of a courtroom before the election, and he's probably convicted at some point, but he's never going to see the inside of it.
The thing about Eric Holder is he was in office.
Yeah.
When you're no longer in office.
Too, it was a long process.
But they didn't care about that after that.
I know. But he still did he testify?
But they weren't going after him after that. That's when Democrats took over. And nobody was going to ask Eric Holder to come talk to him about, whatever right-wing conspiracy at the time. What is different in this case is that there are not a ton of ways that Trump could delay this for 2 years. I mean, there's not a lot, unless they want to. I mean, if they want to try for these state charges, there might be some stuff they can delay on that. But it's like they don't need anything from him. They've got all the goods. They don't need. I don't know. I think it takes less than a year.
We'll see. I hope so. I like in every one of these schemes that have come up over the last several years with Trump. Mueller's coming. Mueller's not coming. Yeah, he's coming. He's in the rear view mirror. He's not coming. I had a guy come on often who was telling me Trump's going to resign any day now. He's never resigning. And every one of these, we're going to build up our hopes, and it doesn't happen. I'm saying probably not going to happen, but we'll see.
I'm an optimist. Now, Fani Willis, Fulton County, I think is going to take a bit. That's going to take a minute.
Yeah. No, he's going to have a lot of legal fronts. I still think it's not going to be enough to stop him from running. We'll see. I hope. But here's the thing. I don't want him to be stopped from running. I want him to get thrashed at the polls so we can be done with this. And the reason I think that could happen is I look at this story that just came out that evidently Fox Corporation, I don't know if you saw this, they're looking to acquire all of the rights to The Apprentice.
Yes.
I'm going, this is how Fox blackmails Trump.
Yes. In so many ways, right? Like, oh man, that's the thing that's crazy. I didn't know that these were up for grabs. That's what's interesting to me, because if we're talking about a news organization that's angling for these videos,
right?
I guarantee you Jeff Bezos got more money. And he is probably willing to just dump a whole lot of it just to mess with Donald Trump. I mean, that's like a good weekend for Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, I mean, or maybe Musk will jump into the middle of it so he can hide it, or who knows what.
Maybe, yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's the kind of thing where that's what what's his name? Some of the people that were on it have said that's where Donald Trump's secrets are, where he starts, wiping the N-word all over everybody and saying some really vile stuff. And all of that was taped. Like, it's not just they're taping the show that they're putting on. Like, the cameras roll at all times, right, because it's technically required to as a game show.
Right. No, because look, we need blooper reels.
Yeah. Well, there's that too.
We need white supremacist blooper reels. Which, were you surprised that none of the folks in the House voted against the resolution on supporting white supremacists? 26 Republicans refused to sign on to something that says we're not white supremacists.
It is just like the stupidest thing, but it was the easiest win. I mean, Democrats literally said, y'all are having a really bad week. It looks like you chose the worst possible week to whip out your January 6th videos, which you're relitigating in the same week that Dominion is proving that Fox is a bunch of liars. Here's a win for you. Here's something really easy. And they're like, oh, no, we're good. We don't want to offend our racists. There are people.
There are people. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Sarah Burris. Sarah's a reporter at Raw Story, rawstory.com if you want to take a look at the work that she does there. I want to go back to Fox for a minute because evidently Liz Cheney had some tweeting to do. Lay it out for us.
So that's the thing, right? All of this stuff that's going on with Republicans who are bringing up January 6th. We don't know why McCarthy handed everything over to Tucker Carlson. Some people are saying that Tucker Carlson helped him get elected as speaker, and that's why. I think personally he made a deal with somebody in the right-wing caucus that he had to turn over all of that footage to Fox. I think somebody made that deal on Tucker's behalf. But I'm like, this kind of stuff is it's the pinnacle of Republican lying and Fox News irrational way of rewriting history. Dan Goldman, Representative Dan Goldman, had the best characterization of the footage that Tucker's been playing this week, and it was the idea of saying, showing footage of the Twin Towers early in the morning on 9/11 before anything hit it, and saying, well, September 11th was mostly peaceful.
Yeah.
It's the exact same thing. It's showing footage after and before and things that didn't, where all of the selective places where nobody was in the Capitol for 5 seconds and claiming, well, clearly this is a false flag.
Yeah, clearly. Bill O'Reilly was a great guy before the falafels and the loofah sponges.
Exactly. This is, it's so frustrating. But, that's the point that Liz Cheney was making. She's like, really, you want to talk about this again? We spent a whole year talking about this. And one of the top issues that voters identified, one of the main reasons that a lot of Republicans switched over to vote for Democrats is because of this idea that, oh crap, our democracy is at stake. They really agreed with that sentiment that was being pushed by Democratic candidates, even if they, weren't Democrats themselves. And so Liz Cheney's comment is, bring it on. Let's talk about this again. In fact, let's talk about it until November 24.
Yeah, no, I think this is strategic on both sides. I think McCarthy kept people out of the committee hearing because he didn't want to have to defend Trump and all of this stuff, and then knew that we have the attention span of gnats and the memory to match, and that eventually down the road this narrative was going to be flipped, and all of this stuff was going to play out into, oh, they're fine people on both sides. And I truly believe that was the calculus at the time, to not put people on there, and also so that Scott Perry and the rest of them and Boebert wouldn't be on the panel, and someone just turned to them and go, "What were you doing on that day?" Kind of a shield,
right? There's that piece of it. I think McCarthy legitimately thought that if they didn't respond, that nobody would pay attention. I think he undercalculated what would actually happen, and I think even the January 6th committee didn't really know what kind of ratings they were going to get, and it just exploded.
Yeah, and I say that was because of Liz Cheney. I go, look, because Republicans understand that medium far better than any of the Democrats. If there's a blooper reel behind the scenes of the January 6th committee, it's her controlling all of the movements.
It's her being the puppet master.
I truly believe that. I believe she's the one who orchestrated all of that stuff. I don't think Democrats are that smart.
We have actually heard that the reason that they hired somebody to be the producer of all of these videos was because of Liz Cheney. I mean, she mandated that there be a professional person who could basically set this whole thing in motion so that it would look as good as it did to the public. But I mean, it's when I think about, I always compare every political issue to my parents because they're Republicans. My dad, very conservative. And he was done after January 6th. We sat here and watched that footage with our mouths hanging open, and he was like, no, I'm done. And he has continued to be done. He still talks about that moment, coming to that realization and how disgusted he was with Donald Trump for all of this. And I think the people who had that moment, I don't think you get rid of that. I really don't. I think that was big for a lot of people who were, willing to pull the lever for Trump, in 20, but are never going to be willing to do it again.
Yeah, but it was still a lot closer than a lot of us would have preferred, especially in states like mine in Pennsylvania. So again, there are some people like your father, but sadly, most people are in their camps. And did you ever see the movie A Face in a Crowd?
Yes.
The Andy Griffith movie. I mean, this is that kind of moment. And I talked about this yesterday, where you find out who these people are, who Tucker Carlson and Hannity and the rest of them are. And in the past, we used to turn away from them. Now, this generation of people have doubled down on defending them because, they believe what we believe because they've told us what to believe.
And it's sad. Like, the thing that's been really tragic about all of this is that, I've got family members who are avid Fox News watchers, and these people are basically trashing their own viewers. And it's like, man, you made my family members hate me for what I believe.
Yep.
And all of it was a lie. And so it's kind of become personal in a lot of ways.
No.
And I hope that more people have that sort of reaction or realization for the family members they've lost to the right-wing nutters.
I hope so as well, and I hope there's some way to come back from it. I just don't know. Lastly, I want to get your thoughts on the Supreme Court asking for more funding to beef up security. Maybe if you stop making really bad decisions. Just
a thought. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like accusing the victim of wearing a skirt that's too short. But maybe that's the solution for Brett Kavanaugh, is he should just dress in drag and then no one will recognize him. That is my suggestion.
So am I getting this right? Am I hearing Sarah Burris saying, well, they were asking for it?
Right. No.
Okay. So
it can't.
All right.
It can't be that.
It can't be that.
But at the same time, members of Congress deal with this every single day.
Right.
Like, there are so many members of Congress that have security that they have to pay for themselves or out of their campaign funds. I mean, grow a pair.
Yeah, it's not that
Seriously.
I'm advocating for it. It's not that I condone it. But like Chris Rock's video, I understand.
Yeah.
There you go. Sarah, appreciate the time. As always, great stuff.
Thanks so much. Have a good weekend.
Our good friend Sarah Burris. Make sure you check out her work over at Raw Story. Rawstory.com is the website. You can find out the incredible work she does. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1911. That was the day that coal miners in Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania, walked out of the mines. It became known as the Slovak Strike because 70% of the strikers were Slovakian immigrants. Unrest was mounting among workers in the non-unionized coal fields. Tens of thousands of miners were signing up to be members of the United Mine Workers of America. And the union was winning improved working conditions and wages for their members, including the 8-hour day. But the Westmoreland miners were not unionized. They still had to work 10-hour days. Then the Keystone Coal Company required the miners to use new safety lights and explosives. The miners had to pay for these items out of their own pockets. Outraged, the miners met to formulate a response. 400 men joined up to a new UMWA local. The company cracked down immediately. They fired 100 men who had attended the meeting. Some were long-term employees who had worked for more than 2 decades in the mines. The miners walked off the job to protest the firings. Soon, the strike spread beyond the Keystone Coal Company. Miners joined the strike from 65 mines belonging to 30 companies. The mining companies responded with every tactic in their arsenals. They evicted the miners from their company homes. They won injunctions against picketing. They recruited recent immigrants from Eastern Europe as scabs. They paid off police who responded brutally to the strikers. 16 miners were killed. Although the strikers held out for 16 months, the strike ended in defeat, with many of the strikers being blacklisted from future work in the coal fields. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So during the break, I was telling Sarah that a friend of the show, comedian Steve Hofstetter, was in Tennessee. In fact, Steve's been on the show a number of times. Did his comedy show in a dress, and of course, you knew it was coming. Sarah's like, "Well, you should wear a dress." I'm going, "I'm never wearing a dress. There aren't dresses big enough." Omar is gone. But, this idea that, as a matter of protest, and look, I would love to do that. I would love to, if there was a way to not wear the dress by looking like, great. But it's incredible to me that we're in a moment where we've got to be talking about this kind of stuff in protest, that people can't just be whoever they're going to be. And the thing that gets me is we've got so many bigger problems. In these states that are pursuing these kind of draconian moral control, moral compass laws, these are states that have high poverty rates, high childhood poverty rates. All of the negatives you can have in a society are elevated, and all of the positives are negative, and yet somehow we're going to fix it all if we just this. It's really very twisted. And I fear where I started today. I fear we see this breaking up of the country, this continual breaking apart into our little silos that understand benefits just the handful. The wealthy do very, very well. And as we move to more of the Elon Muskistans, we lose power. And the more divided we are, we lose power. The one thing the wealthy understand is while they have all the money, we've out-procreated them. If we ever did figure out how to get on the same page, if we ever did find common ground and things that were important, again, they would be on the menu instead. And we were there once. There was a period where working people figured it out. It was after the last Depression. And there's part of me that goes, maybe that's where we have to get. That because we're so easily divided by nonsense. I mean, really, this whole drag thing, absolute nonsense. Utter nonsense. And yet it has dominated our discussions. It has dominated policymaking. Critical race theory is destroying education. I just know it. Well, define it for me. I don't know what it is, but I know it's bad. How many of those videos do I have to see before we realize that we're not talking to each other anymore? We all want the same things, I believe. Good schools for our kids, safe neighborhoods, good jobs that pay good wages, opportunity for the future. But yet we get divided on nonsense, utter nonsense, while they are robbing us blind. I go back to my grandparents' generation, the greatest generation. They were able to come together and put many of their differences aside, and they got policies that enriched the working class like at no other point in history. And they did that by standing together on issues that they agreed on. Like a decent living wage for working people, health care, fighting for retirement security. I wonder if we'll get back to that. Or if it's just more entertaining to worry about what somebody who we don't know is doing somewhere, but we know they're doing it. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back.
Do you have the ability to produce more oil?
We do, but
oil companies plan to keep prices high and supplies low.
Plastic pollution in the ocean is doubling every 6 years. Plus,
you're going the wrong way! What? You're going the wrong way!
CO2 emissions reached record levels in 2022.
All of those wrong way stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
We want oil, gasoline, natural gas because it's cheaper, better, and much more powerful. It's April Fool's Day.
Actually, it's March, but we know who the fool is. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, it does sound like we got a lot of stories about going the wrong way here today.
Yes, unfortunately, we do. Emissions of carbon dioxide reached a record high in 2022, according to the International Energy Agency, with countries emitting more carbon dioxide in the last year than in any other year on record dating back to 1900. It's due to a rebound in air travel from the pandemic and countries increasing use of coal for electricity amid Russia's invasion of Ukraine, disrupting global energy supplies. Annual CO2 emissions remain below pre-pandemic levels, so that's good, and the rise of wind and solar energy plus electric vehicles have helped offset the increase in fossil fuel pollution.
So the emissions that are happening now are theoretically only temporary?
Define temporary.
I'd rather not.
In other news, a new peer-reviewed study finds that methane emissions from agriculture could add nearly 1 degree Celsius of warming to the climate by 2100, even if fossil fuel use is drastically reduced.
Also not good.
Researchers calculated emissions of potent climate-warming methane from the production of meat, dairy, and rice, and warned that without changes to curb methane in the food system, the world is likely to overshoot temperature targets in the Paris Climate Agreement. Heads up, U.S. retail gasoline prices are on the rise again and are likely to go even higher in coming months because the oil industry is reluctant to increase production while it's pulling in record profits.
Of course.
At an energy conference in Texas this week, the CEO of Occidental Petroleum, Vicki Hollub, told CNBC that they are focused on buying back shares and won't increase production to lower prices on American families.
Why not use more of that money to drill more wells, to pump more oil, to theoretically bring down prices?
Well, actually, I think prices are in a good place right now.
I bet you do.
And I think gas prices at the pump are not so bad at this price. So I think it's optimum.
For you, it's optimal. For everyone else, it's terrible, lady.
And thanks in part to fossil fuels, there are now 21,000 pieces of plastic pollution in the ocean for every person on Earth. According to a major study out this week, humans have dumped dramatically more plastic pollution into the ocean than previously estimated. The researchers found that human plastic pollution has been doubling about every 6 years, and they found a rapid rise in tiny microplastic pollution since 2005.
Well, that's okay. With all the oil companies making record profits, I'm sure they'll be able to spend some of that money to clean up the mess that they made in the oceans, right?
The researchers warned that cleaning up and recycling plastic waste will not be enough, and they called for manufacturers to be held responsible for the products they create, saying, quote, "It's time to address the plastic problem at the source."
Yes, please.
But some good news.
Finally.
Australia, for the first time in its history, has rejected an open-pit coal mine. This one was set to be near the Great Barrier Reef. Last month, Australia's Environment Minister rejected an application for the massive coal mine, citing the risk of water pollution and irreversible damage to the reef. The Biden administration Environmental Protection Agency this week proposed tighter limits on wastewater pollution from coal-burning power plants, restoring and tightening Obama-era clean water standards that were rolled back by the Trump administration. Finally, yes, it is still a fact that electric vehicles really are far cleaner than gasoline-powered cars, and that's even when factoring in the need to increase mining for battery production. A new analysis by Quartz, compiled from the most recent data, finds that even after factoring in emissions from mining for materials required for EV batteries and the manufacturing process, The direct emissions from driving a typical internal combustion engine passenger car over its lifetime still far outstrips the total life cycle emissions of a typical EV by a factor of 4.
Well, you'd think Republicans would finally get that now that Elon Musk is apparently on their side, but message hasn't gotten to Donald Trump yet, apparently, so we keep paying at the pump. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So you remember the other day we were talking about, advances and workers' ability to get a little flexibility, more life-work balance. In fact, as I said the other day, I think Democrats need to stand up and take a much stronger view of what the future is going to be. If Tucker Carlson can come out and say we should not have automated trucks because it's bad for high school educated men who are overwhelmingly employed in that industry, which I wholeheartedly support, who knew I agreed with something with Schmucker Carlson? Democrats should be picking up on this and moving in a direction. And I talked about this idea of a 4-day work week. Been talking about this for years. Finally, in my state of Pennsylvania, got a couple of guys who are going to be moving on this idea. Again, devil in the details, and we'll find out about it. And that's why I've asked Pennsylvania State Representative Dave Madsen and State Representative Joshua Siegel to come talk with us. Guys, appreciate the time.
Thanks for having us.
So let's start with you, Dave. First and foremost, how'd this come to you? Why now? Why is this important?
Yeah, so as you said in your previous comments, this is not necessarily a new idea. It's been talked about for some time. We know each other, Rick, from I came out of the AFL-CIO, Pennsylvania AFL-CIO as a community service and education director. And in the labor movement in Pennsylvania, we've been talking about a 4-day work week for some time. I think what initially triggered this conversation, and specifically looking into the specific legislation, was when the New York Times released an article a few weeks ago saying that a pilot study was done in the United Kingdom, and roughly around 60 businesses participated, and it was a 6-month trial period, and the overwhelming majority found that a 4-day work week increased productivity, helped with retention rate, and also showed that workers felt their mental health improved and their overall health improved as well. So that sent off some alarm bells, or not alarm bells, but a lot of interest for me. And I was happy to sit next to my colleague, Representative Pielli, who's also working with Rep. Siegel and I on this. And we were just talking shop on the House floor. And I said, hey, what are some bills you're interested in working on? And he said, well, I'm looking into a 4-day work week. And I said, I just saw that study. And we decided we'd want to work on it. And then we found out Representative Siegel was also interested in working on it as well. And that's, we started collaborating on this. It's very early stages, but right now we're optimistic. It's gaining a lot of buzz. This is our third, you're the third media outlet to want to talk about this. And we've only been really working on it for a few weeks. So that means that there's some momentum. There's a lot of interest, and we're excited to talk about it. I'll let Rep. Siegel chime in.
Yeah, no, that study is important because, who knew happy workers would be more productive? Wow, who knew? Josh, I want to get your thoughts because, again, this is to me, Democrats need to be the party of working people. And this, again, is another one of those things I think you can take to voters and go, look, this is what we're working on. We're working on making lives better. And I think a 4-day work week, giving people the opportunity to have a better life-work balance is something most certainly that we should be able to deliver.
Yeah, and for me, I'm a proud labor Democrat, and I think that we need to be aggressive, bold, and audacious about advancing the cause of working folks. And I think, I really want Pennsylvania to be a
sort of a standard bearer. We're the Keystone State, and I want us to sort of be at the keystone of redefining what it means to be a worker in America. And I think if you ask the average person that's working a 9 to 5 or, is on the factory line, the thing that they'll tell you is that they're overworked, they're burnt out, and they're tired. And frankly, we as Americans tend to define ourselves by the work we do. And I think that that's backwards. I think that we should define ourselves by the free time we have with our family, the ability to focus on the things that matter most, time with our kids, times with our loved ones. We are all given a finite amount of time on this planet, and we should not spend it, exhausted, tired, and burnt out. Our work is not really, we work as a means to survive, but it should not be the thing that defines our lives. And the interesting thing about the study in the UK was, workers that, had the 4-day work week were, 40% of them said they were more likely to take up new hobbies. They were more likely to exercise, more likely to focus on their mental health. And really as a society, I think, we're sick. We work ourselves to death. It's why part of the reason we're on antidepressants, and so many folks are finding outlets that are often unhealthy because we're burnt out as a country, as workers. And we've gotten a raw deal for decades where, we work more and more hours for less and less pay. And so I think we really need to redefine that balance and set the standard and say, you want good workers, you want people to be happy to work at your company. Well, you need to make sure they have dignity and respect and that they can actually live their life. And as you said, lo and behold, not a surprise, they're happy as hell to work for a company that actually respects their free time, and they put in more work and they get a better product when they actually have some time and they know that they've got an extra weekend, a longer weekend to be with their loved ones, their kids, to go hiking, to enjoy nature, to take up a new hobby. I mean, that's the stuff that really enriches life, and it's not the 9 to 5 that you punch in and punch out of.
Yeah, one of the things I found interesting in that study is it said that fathers were able to spend 27% more time with their children because they were commuting 27% less. So the time that they were spent going back and forth to work, they were actually able to spend with their children and spend with their kids, which I think is incredible. As the father of 3, I would love to have more time with my kids. So Dave, let me go to you then, because obviously this is all great. Sounds great. Sounds fabulous. A 4-day work week. What are the chances of, let's start first, getting it through the Pennsylvania legislature? I think it'll go through the House because Democrats now control the House. Congratulations, for the first time in quite a long time. But the Senate, much like a lot of times the place where good ideas go to die, any thoughts on how this maneuvers through something like that?
Yeah, so first, one thing I'll say is it's not necessarily a guarantee it would just pass the House because it's Democrat controlled. We have a big, diverse caucus. We had a orientation earlier this week where we went and did a deep dive on how diverse it is. We have anything from progressive Democrats to some more conservative Democrats. So first, we got to get consensus amongst our caucus. I think we can get there. The conversations preliminary we've had have been positive. But, a lot of my colleagues have said, well, first, let's devil's in the details here, Dave. Let's get some finite details and present it to us. And, we'll kind of go from there. But I am confident we can come up with some sort of compromise that gets it through the House. Look, I mean, the truth is if the governor earlier in his address mentioned he wanted to bring more jobs to Pennsylvania. Well, frankly, if you want to bring more jobs, you need workers. And right now, in my district in the Harrisburg region, for every one worker, there's 2 jobs. We have a workers deficit. So right now we need to find innovative ways to attract workers to Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania struggled with brain drain for a long time, meaning people born here, from here, get educated here, but then they go to other places. And frankly, I think if we're going to attract particularly millennials and Gen Z that are talented, that are living in a major metro area and Washington, D.C., New York. There's a lot of beautiful things in Pennsylvania and a lot of nice communities, but they may need some convincing. And I think employers, if they want to recruit top talent, may have to look at something like this. This incentivizes and helps them do that.
Right.
It gives them a tax credit. So it offsets any costs that they may incur. If, say, like they're in an industry where, hey, if they have a person working less one day, that might mean less revenue. This makes up that difference for them. And again, it goes back to the fact that workers are more productive. These companies that have done this are making money. So it's a win-win. I think Representative Siegel really nailed it on the head with just some of the moral aspects to this as well, that it just will make workers happier and live better lives. So I think what we have to hone in when we negotiate with the Senate is that this is a business-friendly piece of legislation. It's not a mandate. This is an incentive-based program. It's not forcing any employers to do it, and it would give them a subsidy in order to do this. And we can show through the studies that we've had that they'll make money off of it. And it will. And the other thing is, as we know, employers don't necessarily do a real good job of measuring when they have turnover. Turnover is one of the most expensive things that can happen to a business. A lot of times the focus is on high wages and benefits, but high turnover is a high cost to businesses as well. So if this addresses high turnover, helps them recruit talent, and gets them more money, I think it's a no-brainer. And I think if the business community, if we can get their support, and they've signaled that they are interested, and we've had some positive conversations thus far, I think the Senate will work with us on it and pass the legislation.
So, Josh, let me ask you, because, in looking, I know you're just working through the details. I want to know what the vision of this is. Are we talking about 4 10-hour days, 4 8-hour days? Are we talking about a shorter work week? Because I'm an advocate of starting looking at some of our antiquated labor laws. And, much like the 8-hour day of the past, 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for what we will, labor needs a new mantra to get people more time at home. So a 4-day work of 8 hours is a time cut. How are you envisioning that this is going to work out? Will this be 4 days, 4 8-hour days for 5 8-hour days pay? How do you envision this?
Well, I think that the goal is to make sure that it doesn't come at the expense of workers, that, we're not rolling back their hours and then rolling back their pay. The idea is that, they're going to put out more work than they've probably ever put out before because they're happier, healthier, and more motivated. But they're going to be working less hours. I think the UK study looked at, a 32-hour work week. Look, the 40-hour work week is a relic of a completely different time period when you had to be, on the factory floor for a sustained period of time. And there was this output kind of mindset. But the reality is, the economy has changed. And it is important, I think, that we are unified as a caucus and from an ideological perspective around making sure that the workday gets shorter, that we experiment with, how long the individual workday itself needs to be. I think there's a lot of research out there about the fact that, frankly, a lot of time spent at the office is a lot of wasted time. It's the water cooler talk, it's the surfing the internet. if companies actually really did a deep dive on the amount of time that workers were sort of just filling the day, I think they'd be pretty shocked at how few hours are really needed to get the stuff you need to get done, and how much time they really could actually be at home. I think
I'm struggling with that one, Josh. I think I'm struggling with, you got lazy workers who are just hanging around and we're paying them, because I know some employers, we need to get in there and crack the whip and get those people working.
Yeah, well, no, I don't think that they're lazy. I think it's that we expect that we create these really arbitrary work days. We say you got to be there for 8 hours, and the reality is that people are pretty damn efficient and pretty freaking productive. But all of a sudden you've got this 8-hour day, and you wind up trying to fill it with work. You wind up trying to keep yourself busy a lot of the time. And I think we need to give workers credit that they can manage their own time. They know how to get their job done. They're good at what they do. They are motivated. But I think we need to understand that the 40-hour work week as it stands, you wind up spending a whole heck of a lot of time trying to fill your day. And people wind up, what I mean? I'm not saying workers are lazy. I don't think they're lazy.
I wasn't saying that, but I can hear an employer going, they're just doing nothing. We got to get out there and crack the whip. But you're right.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I think it's important to recognize that when you just arbitrarily say, you got this 8-hour day, it's a carryover from a completely different type of industry, a completely different type of mindset. The reality is that those workers wind up trying to, you got to fill that 8-hour day. You got to look busy when you've gotten your work done. You've done your job. You've been productive. You've got your output. You should be now rewarded with, good pay and the chance to, go see the fruits of your labor and get a chance to, take a vacation, go home, go out to dinner with your loved one or whatever. That's what I think about. I certainly don't think any worker is lazy. And I think companies need to recognize that they force this kind of mentality on their workers, and that they're that's where a lot of the misery comes from. You're sitting at your office and you're like, hey, I'm done. I did what I needed to do.
Yeah, I could be doing something better. No, you're right.
Right. Why can't I go home?
No, empowered workers are always going to be much more productive. Dave, you wanted to jump on that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to Rep. Siegel's point. it's the truth is, what happens, I think, with a lot of workers, and I've dealt with this in my life, is, let's be honest, a lot of resources and services that you need are open at 9 to 5 or 8 to 4. Say if you have to go to the bank or go take your car to the shop, yeah, you have personal time or sick days to address a lot of these things. But frankly, I think people in day-to-day life just need more time to do. It's not necessarily just relaxing, just life, adult
to do life. Yeah,
definitely.
Go to the grocery store. We're at this stage now. I mean, it's a blessing that our parents are living to be 80 or 90. But folks around Rep Siegel and I's age, we're raising kids, and then we're also taking care of elderly parents. And if a modern family could sit down with your person and say, hey, we have an option of a 4-day work week from both of our employers. Well, you take Mondays and then I'll take Friday off, and we can split up the responsibilities in the household and take care of our families. And guess what? They're not going to be sitting there texting and figuring out daycare at work, or sneaking away to call to talk to a bank teller because they need an extra credit line or whatever it is. These practical daily life things. I mean, I think that's a direct correlation with productivity. When you have less distracted workers, they're going to be more productive.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of whole bunch of reasons why this is a great idea. The only thing standing in the way is corporate America. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show with Pennsylvania State Representatives Dave Madsen and Joshua Siegel. We'll get links out on their website on how you can take a look at their websites and the work that they do. But we're talking about the 4-day work week and the path here in my state of Pennsylvania of how we get to that. Let me ask you: there are other states are other states doing this? Is there any movement in other legislatures to do this kind of thing? Because I gotta imagine that this is popular. Somebody's got to be moving it.
I know Maryland is taking action right now. I think they're the first state to pioneer this approach, and they're doing a very similar to what is model to what we're proposing, which is the tax incentive based model to try and encourage businesses to explore this potential. And I think to Dave's point, Rep. Madsen's point, this is one of those instances where the interest of workers and businesses actually really align here. I think there's an opportunity for buy-in from both sides. The COVID epidemic and the Great Resignation has really just sort of scrambled the business model. You've got hybrid work, and businesses are trying to adapt as quick as they can. And this is one of, I think, those really smart innovations that businesses are going to start to recognize, because it is about attracting workers. It's about making sure, especially that the next generation of workers who value flexibility a lot more than they do compensation a lot of the time, they really want to make sure that they've got that free time. You're not going to be the workforce of tomorrow. You're not going to be the employer of tomorrow unless you are adopting these proposals. And that was one of the things that COVID did, is it reset the worker dynamic. It gave workers a lot more power to shop around for jobs, to demand more from their employers in terms of flexibility. I think this is that next sort of natural evolution. And I think the best thing that states can do is help push that along and force that mindset change by being a partner. This is a really it's a tax incentive. It's a collaborative effort to get businesses to embrace that mindset. I think they'd be foolish not to.
I agree with you. But let me ask you this, Josh, because, my view on this is I want to get to the 32-hour work week. I want to get to a shorter work week because I know what's coming. We've all read the economic forums, predictions for the future. Half of the jobs we currently do are going to be done by computers or AI, or we're going to be losing a lot of jobs, but we're going to be gaining some as well. The number of man hours is going to go down. People need jobs. It seems like a shorter work week gives more opportunities for more people to have those jobs. So it seems like to me the future is still employment, that people get their health care, because we're stuck on this. That this is a way to make sure that workers don't take it on the chin when technological advances wipe out millions of jobs. I'm curious if you see this as part of that.
Yeah. Well, to your point about the necessitation of more workers, right? So I think the story of the last few decades has been that companies have tried to put more and more work on less and less employees, right? They've tried to demand more from fewer folks, and I think when you create that 4-day work week and when you shorten the work day, companies are going to have to hire additional people to kind of spread the balance of the workload out. And I think that means you're creating more opportunities. And I don't think this is just something for high-tech jobs in the creative economy. I think if you work in a skills-intense industry, like, in the trades, this means that if you want to get a project done on time, you're going to have to hire more working class folks to make sure that you're still making sure that they're getting that Friday or Monday off. It just means you're going to have more people on the job. And that's good because that's more money in the hands of working folks. That's, reducing the workload all around. I do think automation is probably going to be the most sort of decisive, but also destabilizing thing we have to contend with as a society. And I think this is one of those ways where we make sure we're creating opportunity by making sure that everybody's got a shot to still be a part of the economy in a productive way. And, at least while our, employer-based health insurance model exists, get access to the kind of benefits you can only really get from, our employment-based model until hopefully as a society, we can shift that to more of one of solidarity and then, government sponsored. But in the meantime, I agree with your assessment there. I think this creates opportunity because it compels employers to hire more folks.
Yeah, and for me, it also means that you guys as legislators are getting ahead of the technological catastrophe that's, the tsunami of job losses that are potentially going to happen. And we do such a terrible job of legislating ahead of horrible. And we usually reactionary. So for me, this is the beginning of maybe starting to lay the groundwork. Do you agree, Dave? I mean, are you with me on this?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I think that we, in this new economy, in the post-COVID economy, we're going to have to continue to have conversations like this around how do we adapt our workforce and our economy to growing technology, AI. That certainly is our future. And listen, it's not just going to be blue collar jobs. We're going to see loss through automation. It's going to be a lot of white collar work. I mean, frankly, what I saw during the pandemic teleworking is I think, the software can manage and report how much a worker is, how many calls they're taking, how many cases that they're solving. You really need a middle management person at that stage. So I agree. And listen, and my opinion is this: we have so much collective wealth in this country, and the technology has advanced so much. I don't think we all have to work as much as we're working and struggle as much as we're struggling. I think Rep. Siegel nailed it on the head with his previous comments. I mean, we're advancing so much as a society now that I think we can afford and people can have an extra day to be with their families and loved ones. And that's, this is just one piece of many to adapt our workforce and economy, but I definitely think it will be a key component to it.
No, that's an important point because, look, as technology takes over an industry, it gets away with, gets rid of people. It consolidates wealth and into the hands of a few. For me, we need these kind of redistributive policies that are going to help a working class survive, or we're going to have chaos. People need jobs. When Tucker Carlson comes out and says we can't have automated trucks on the road because all of these high school educated white men aren't going to have jobs, that's a pretty definitive statement saying we're going to squash progress because of the social compact. And it's something that I think this is a part of. So last question I've got for you. What can we do to help to get this move through? What can I do? Because I think it's important. What can our listeners do?
Dave, you want to take that, or I'm happy to hop on that?
Yeah, sure. I'll start it off and let you follow up. Look, I think right now is continue to monitor it. We will be follow our pages on social media and our websites. Once the bill, we have a final draft, we will be doing a press conference. We'll be putting out some editorials as well. Rick, if you can continue to circulate it through your network. I follow you on Twitter. I know a lot of folks follow you and listen to your show. So just continue to spread the word out. And once the legislation and bill is introduced, if you're a supporter of this stuff, just call your legislator and say, hey, I see that there's a 4-day work week proposal. I'd like you to consider a vote. Go to that office. Listen, reps, if they don't hear anything, they assume that, hey, I guess nobody in my district cares. So, but if they get calls and people come into their office saying, hey, I need you on this, believe me, they will listen and pay attention. And
guys, I appreciate the time. We're out of time. I'd love to have you back as this continues down the road. This is really important, but I appreciate it. Thanks so much, Reps Dave Madsen and Joshua Singal. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Take a quick break. Right back. Stick around and listen to the Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1911. That was the day that coal miners in Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania, walked out of the mines. It became known as the Slovak Strike because 70% of the strikers were Slovakian immigrants. Unrest was mounting among workers in the non-unionized coal fields. Tens of thousands of miners were signing up to be members of the United Mine Workers of America. And the union was winning improved working conditions and wages for their members, including the 8-hour day. But the Westmoreland miners were not unionized. They still had to work 10-hour days. Then the Keystone Coal Company required the miners to use new safety lights and explosives. The miners had to pay for these items out of their own pockets. Outraged, the miners met to formulate a response. 400 men joined up to a new UMWA local. The company cracked down immediately. They fired 100 men who had attended the meeting. Some were long-term employees who had worked for more than 2 decades in the mines. The miners walked off the job to protest the firings. Soon, the strike spread beyond the Keystone Coal Company. Miners joined the strike from 65 mines belonging to 30 companies. The mining companies responded with every tactic in their arsenals. They evicted the miners from their company homes. They won injunctions against picketing. They recruited recent immigrants from Eastern Europe as scabs. They paid off police who responded brutally to the strikers. 16 miners were killed. Although the strikers held out for 16 months, the strike ended in defeat, with many of the strikers being blacklisted from future work in the coal fields. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Obviously, the main social problem in America is that black people run everything, and us white folks as a group just can't get a fair break, right? So says Texas Governor Greg Abbott. As a lifelong white Texan, I can't tell you how amazing it is to see our governor come out unapologetically for a return to the old-time institutional bigotry. Absolutely freaking amazing. Apparently, Abbott fantasizes that hordes of black people are seizing control of our government, universities, banks, media, and other power centers, shoving aside more qualified and entitled whites. Going from fantasy to hallucination, he concludes that this takeover is caused by corporate and government hiring policies that bolster diversity and inclusiveness in our society. Even attempting to implement this democratic goal, he barks, is illegal because, get this, it violates federal law against discrimination. Yes, in Greg world, fighting discrimination against minorities discriminates against the white majority. So, Abbott has actually issued an edict directing state agencies and universities to shut down all hiring programs that include diversity goals. His official injunction declares that deliberately trying to stop excluding minorities leads to, quote, the alienation of individuals from the workplace. He means, of course, that some white people are alienated, that non-white people are getting job opportunities. Never mind that minorities routinely suffer extreme alienation from the workplace, i.e., exclusion. Abbott's attack on diversity also includes more exclusion of women, people with disabilities, LGBTQ people, veterans. Give him credit. He's an equal opportunity abuser. This is Jim Hightower saying Abbott and his right-wing ilk should realize that the price of creating an exclusive society with no diversity is that they would then be stuck living with people like themselves.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So today, President Biden came out with the budget, his budget. And again, like all budgets, moral documents. What are your priorities? What do you want? How are you going to pay for it? That kind of stuff, that important kind of stuff. Because we want roads and bridges. We want education. We want a military. We want children to not go hungry. We want a lot of stuff. And how do you get to paying for it? And I think part of what the president came out with, and the big thing that's getting the attention, is taxing rich people. Who would have thought? and here to share some thoughts on whether it's a good idea, bad idea, or something we should be doing, that tax the rich thing. The guy who actually wrote the book, Tax the Rich, our good friend Morris Pearl. He's the chair of the Patriotic Millionaires, patrioticmillionaires.org, the website. Morris, thanks for taking time for us.
Great to be in your show, Rick.
So you, as the guy who literally wrote the book on taxing the wealthy, you are now, you got to be kind of happy, no?
Yeah. I mean, I'd be even happier if I was, standing next to the president when he signed the bill and hands me the pen. And I'd be very happy if I was just watching it on TV. But having him on our side, that's a big step in the right direction. We've moved a huge way over the last, 6 years. And I think that we're moving in the right direction. The president of the United States is with us on taxing the rich.
So what does that mean? What does that taxing the rich, what does that mean?
Well, what it means in this case, it was the billionaires' minimum income tax. If you have over $100 million in your investments, you're going to have to pay some taxes on the money you make, even if you don't sell your investments. If you make money that you can spend, you're going to have to pay a small amount of that in taxes, whether you sell them or not in the future. And that is going to make a difference. Part of the reason why we rich people are getting so rich is that we don't have to pay taxes on the money we make.
Right.
Until we, feel like it.
Now, they're calling a billionaire minimum income tax, the BMIT. As you point over, households over $100 million are talking about a 25% rate by taxing all income. And what does that mean? I mean, because we keep hearing, the rich dad, poor dad guy going, the dirty secret is rich people don't have any income. So if you have no income, how can you tax them?
If you're a billionaire, you don't need any income. You can spend the money you already have.
Right. So how do we tax them then if they have no income?
What we do is we look at their investments. And if they make money in their investments, we tax that and call it income.
Aha.
We do.
See, now that makes a lot more sense.
I think the president is making a lot of sense. We have a choice to make, Rick, as a nation. If we have to make one of two choices. We can either get rich people to sacrifice a little bit of their money and pay a bit more in taxes, or we can tell all the Americans who are retiring, who paid into Social Security all their lives, that they have to sacrifice and give up some of their Medicare. Frankly, I think the rich people are the ones who we should ask to sacrifice, not the Americans who've been working their whole lives and putting their money away.
Now, when I threw this idea that when the president put out his tweet saying, hey, we're going to move on this, I said, hey, it's about time we start taxing rich people because we need that revenue to do all the things that you just said. Immediately, you get the blowback. The rich people pay all the taxes. And, when you look at the bare numbers, when you go 50% of the people in this country, the bottom 50 pay, a minuscule amount because they don't have anything. And the top half, they pay all the 97% of the taxes. Their argument is, well, the rich people pay all it, but when you look at as it breaks down, the top 1% pays far more than everybody else, which again is very curious to me and why I think this billionaire minimum tax is so very important.
Well, they pay a lot of dollars because they're very rich. They don't pay a high percentage of the money they make. That's the thing, is that you and your staff pay a higher percentage of the money you make than rich people pay as a percentage of money they make.
Yeah.
And that's why the rich people are getting richer and richer and richer. And half the people in Western Pennsylvania are having trouble just hanging on and living paycheck to paycheck. That's the problem.
And interestingly enough, according to one tax agency, they said that the average federal tax rate paid by the average American in this country is about 14%. And to your point, the average billionaire now pays about 8%. So you're hitting right that note. It's a larger number, but it's a smaller percentage of income.
And the average truck driver is paying a lot more than 14%, I assure you.
I can attest to that. So in looking at this, I go, this is great. The president has come out and brought out this great idea. We're going to start taxing rich people, and we're going to feed children. what could be a better statement? We're going to get some investment into the earned income tax credit so families can get out of poverty. What are the chances of this actually passing? When was the last time a president's budget actually got all the way through?
I'm just saying I don't even know the last time a president's budget actually passed. It may have been before I was born, but we're going to do what we can to get some of these ideas to move forward. It may take a year, it may take another election, but we're going to continue pushing. We've been pushing a long time, and we've got a pretty convoluted tax system right now, as you know. The Congress has come up with all kinds of rules that have to incentivize people to do things. And, we need to incentivize people. And, we're afraid that these billionaire hedge fund managers might go on strike. So we have to give them a lower tax rate than everyone else. Maybe we should give emergency room nurses a lower tax rate than everyone else. I think that's what I'm actually worried about, not a lack of people willing to do hedge fund management.
Or more importantly, maybe we take that tax that we're bringing in and we fund education so that emergency room nurse doesn't have a lifetime of student loan debt. Maybe we make investments in the future of this country without taking on massive debt so that the future has to pay off the past investments. I don't know, just a thought.
We can do that. We did that when I was young. I had all kinds of subsidies when I was a young person growing up and wanting to go to college. And now we've come up with this new idea. Everyone should pay their own way and the rich people should be fine. And everyone else, get student loans and spend your entire life paying them off. That's not fair. It doesn't work. It doesn't move our country forward. It doesn't give people opportunities that end up making our country have a better and bigger economy for everyone.
I think that's an important point to keep pointing out and repeat as often as possible. We are a wealthy country, and we are one of the wealthiest countries in the history of civilization. At its wealthiest moment, there's almost nothing that we can't afford, and yet I keep hearing, Morris, we can't afford health care for our workers. We can't afford education for our kids. We can't afford infrastructure. We can't afford to make sure that no child goes to bed hungry. We can't afford to make sure that no veteran remains homeless. We keep being told there are all these things we can't do, but yet we can have billionaires with all kinds of wealth.
Because back in the 1980s, some guy with the stripes going the wrong way in his shirt came along and said, greed is good. And then, Americans voted for a guy who came along and said, the government is the problem, not the solution. And we have to change that. We have to say we're going to do things collectively, do things together, do things collectively we can't do individually, and we will all be better off.
Yeah.
Every one of us.
So tomorrow, because this is an important moment because this is the rallying cry for people who want to see investments. What are we advocating for people to do? I mean, look, I've been saying for a while, the bigger, it goes back to the days of the cave. The bigger your shoulders, the more water you carry back to the cave. The wealthier you are, the more society should expect from it, and the more you should want to do. This is the thing that gets me. And you walk in the circles of very, very wealthy people. They could have legacies, lifelong legacies. Jeff Bezos could end childhood poverty with a stroke of a pen, and his legacy would be he ended hunger in this country forever. And yet I don't see people thinking in terms of that kind of legacy.
I mean, we're just trying to organize our people. I'm the head of the group of the Patriotic Millionaires, and we're trying to organize our people to lean on their congressmen and their senators to support the president's efforts. To make a decision in favor of having the rich people be the ones to make some sacrifice and not all the people who've been working for a living their whole lives. And we can organize a bunch of rich people and investors to do that, and that's what we're trying to do right now.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show here with Morris Pearl. Morris is the chairman of the Patriotic Millionaires, patrioticmillionaires.org, their website. Lots of resources there to take a look at. I want to get your thoughts on, I look at someone like Elon Musk, who's now coming out. Evidently, they're going to build a company town. And I see a lot of the good old days of the 80s and 90s coming back up. This idea that we have benevolent dictators, we have rich people who have a vision of how they want things to go, and they're going to build towns and create jobs in those towns. And we know morality clauses and all kinds of stuff will follow. Do you see that this is potentially the direction we're going as wealth inequality continues to grow if we don't do something at some point very soon through our government?
If we don't do something about it, yeah. And I have nothing against Mr. Musk spending his money however he wants.
I have no problem with it either. My problem is I know how bad company towns were throughout the history for working people.
And we can't continue. I mean, there's company towns right now in West Virginia. I've been talking to people who say they're trying to get their government to provide running water, something I don't even think about. It's so obvious. And there's people who, basically don't have any money at all because they get paid from their job, but they deduct for their rent for their house and their bill of their groceries, and they end up getting zero. And yeah, so that's not so good. If somebody wants to live in Elon Musk town, great, go for it, do it. But I don't think that's how everyone should live. And I think we should make decisions by a democratic process, by voting and electing people to make decisions, not by having a dictator, no matter how benevolent, making all the decisions for everybody. That doesn't work. I mean, it's not how I want to live. And I don't think it's how most Americans want to live.
Now, what do you say to the person who goes, Morris, you're advocating to tax the rich. In fact, you have written the book, Tax the Rich, how lies, loopholes, and lobbyists make the rich even richer. And we'll get links on social media how you can take a look at the book and pick it up maybe at the A place, or go to Powell's Books more specifically. What do you say to the person who goes, Morris, you want to pay higher taxes? Go ahead. Do what you do you. I don't want to.
Well, look, we can't run a country with everyone paying whatever they want. You couldn't run a country club and say, oh, everyone just send in whatever money they want to. It wouldn't work. You have to set the dues for the country club so you have enough money to pay the groundskeepers and pay the dining room staff and do all the things your country club does. You can't run a country that way either. We have to have rules, and the same rules that apply to everybody. And if people are we're going to ask people that work every day to send in 20% of their income, then we have to ask the rich people that make money sitting and watching the numbers on their computer screens to send in 25% of their income too. We have to have the same rules for everyone.
No, I'm right there with you. So last line of questioning I've got for you, because there's clearly now differences between the red hat and the blue hat. I keep hearing people, the politicians, they're all the same. Biden has come out with his plan. We're going to raise taxes on millionaires, have a progressive tax. We're going to invest in making sure that kids don't go hungry and doing the things that we had talked about, raising corporate taxes a little bit, both domestically and internationally. And the Republican plan of we're just going to slap a national sales tax of 30% on everybody, on everything you buy. There are two very competing visions for the future. Do you see it any other way?
We are at a crossroad. And yeah, 30% sales tax and everything, that'll mean me paying a lot less taxes than I do now, I assure you. 30% tax on everything, someone who's living paycheck to paycheck, that'll mean a lot more taxes for them. And if you want to shift the burden and give more money to the rich and less money to people who are working for a living, then that's the Republican plan. If you think that people who work for a living should get health care and not have to pay any more tax than they do now, and the rich people should pay a little more, that's the president's plan. You have a clear choice in front of you. There's clearly a difference between the two sides, and it's up to Americans to make a decision.
Again, it's the classic, which side are you on? Interesting stuff. Morris, as always, I appreciate your insight and your input. Good stuff. Keep up the great work there at Patriotic Millionaires. I look forward to having you back again next week.
Thank you. See you next Thursday, Rick. Thanks.
Good stuff. Our good friend Morris Pearl. Check out their website, patrioticmillionaires.org. We'll get links out on social media. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. You've likely heard the recent news stories about the proposed Keystone XL pipeline. The national media continues to report as labor, energy groups, environmental, and Native American activists all debate the proposed pipeline. But did you know that on this day in labor history marked the beginning of another oil pipeline project? The year was 1974, when work began on the Trans-Alaskan pipeline system. In the early 1970s, the United States faced an energy crisis as international oil prices skyrocketed. The Alaskan Pipeline Project was started as a means to address the crisis, although many in the environmental movement protested the idea. Tens of thousands of workers flocked to Alaska. Towns along the oil line boomed overnight. The population of the town of Valdez more than quadrupled from 1,500 to more than 6,000 in just 1 year. A 2-bedroom log cabin without indoor plumbing could rent for as high as $500 a month. In Fairbanks, demand for space by workers was so high, workers had to rent bed space. In addition to the high costs, workers also had to endure the harsh cold. Todd Honer, a pipeline laborer, described the experience. When you're working at night on the North Slope, the wind is usually blowing, the snow is usually blowing, communications is marginal, and the smoke from the diesel engines, the cold, the chaos. It was surreal, and we continued that for 10, 12 hours. And I am sure by the end of every night, everybody wanted to quit and just go home. Many more workers did not even get the chance to brave the cold, as more workers arrived than there were available jobs. Those who had arrived too late to land a job had to return home disappointed, while others never made it home at all. During its construction, the Trans-Alaskan Pipeline took the lives of 32 workers. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Interestingly enough, got a couple of comments from folks saying a company town in this day and age wouldn't be a bad thing. And again, it comes back to this idea, this ideology, this tribe thing. You know, I want people who are just like me. I want carbon copies of me. I want to live next door to me. And I'm like, seriously, you want to live next door to yourself? I don't know. You can be pretty annoying. But, you know, it's one of these things where I go, this idea that we're going to have homogenous communities, that I'm only going to associate with people who are exactly like I am and think exactly like I do, and never shall we have, you know, divergent thought processes. You know, the workplace is where, you know, where we worked a lot of this stuff out. And as I've said before, the reason to have strong labor unions is that we deal with a lot of these issues in the workplace, and workers deal with them among themselves. And, you know, again, this idea, I'm struggling with the idea of people wanting to be part of company towns. The idea that one person, and look, there are these places around the country. There are a lot of them. They're called cults. A lot of the religious leaders have their own little towns where you have to sign on to these morality pledges. You go back to, you know, the Henry Fords of the world, that if you wanted to work for his factory, they would come and inspect your home. And you had better have the right things in your home. You know, a picture of him over the mantle, the Bible. You better be leading a virtuous life. This is where we're heading. It seems like we're heading back to. The Puritan police are coming for us. And whether you're doing things that you find objectionable or not, or you think someone else, doesn't matter. Because it's that eventually they're going to get around to you. The idea that we're all in the shark tank, and eventually the shark runs out of people to be outraged by. And then it's you. My problem with the kind of power and control in the hands of so few is that we get abuse all the time. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And these company towns have proven throughout history to be horrible for working people, as these cults have. And I find it interesting that it's my religious zealot class, my religious zealot friends, who are the most willing to say, no, we need to have, a community just for us. People who think like we do, so we can ostracize the other. Now understand, this is the brilliance of what the benevolent dictator understands. Because we can pit each other against each other on those things. You'll be around people just like you, people dumb enough to think this is a good idea. This way I can work you to death and profit off of your labor, and you'll just keep going because, hey, you're surrounded by people just like you. No one will ever ask a question like, are we getting screwed here? Could we make more money? Should our kids have better opportunity? Could we get better health care? Can I go shop at a store across the way? As long as you're willing to walk in that straight line, and I'm not talking about people's sexuality, as long as you're willing to walk on that line and never deviate, these company towns are fabulous. All of your needs are taken care of. Until they're not. Oh, the Pullman situation was a perfect example. The question is when do we wake up and realize that we're the frogs in the pot and the water's boiling? The zealots are legislating in state after state. Legislating morality, privatizing education, banning books again. We're banning freaking books again. It's all of that horrible that I read about as a kid. And I keep coming back to, like the book 1984, I always joke, two people read it. One person goes, oh my God, it's a horrible, horrible thing. Who would ever want to live like that? And the other person looks at it and goes, wow, this is a great playbook. We should do this. And there's part of me that goes, that's how you decide, I guess, which side politically you're on. Which hat you wear. The hat of free expression and liberty, pursuit of happiness, or the side of I'm only going to be around people who think exactly like I do and believe that that is somehow freedom and liberty. The idea that somehow having only people who have the values that I have, and some of them may be really freaking twisted, but they think like I do. They're like me. That's scary, because we then lead to all kinds of the other negatives that we've seen throughout history. And I'm a little worried, because I look at the Lauren Boebert thing, and the Lauren Boebert thing is interesting to me because the zealot class gives her a pass, because her baby's not gonna allow his baby to be aborted. No siree. She's a strong champion. Yet, if I still remember the conservative movement, going after women for not taking care of their children. As a mother, where was she? Their ideology, their company town-esque behavior and beliefs kind of break down. It's always the do as I say, not as I do mentality. And, listening to Lauren Boebert talk about, and this is digressing, talking about her, saying we should do away with sex education, someone who was, knocked up as a teenager, unmarried, probably not something someone you should not be listening to. In fact, she should be the cautionary tale of why we should have the other option. Choose the other option. And I think this is where we are. We're in that, which side are we on? Like what I was talking about Morris, we're in the tax situation. Which side? You tax the wealthy or 30% tax on everybody? Which side are you on? Going to be interesting to see how it plays out from an observer's point of view. Fun to watch. Want to hear your thoughts, though? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something in your mind. I want to hear them. Also, if you miss any portion of the program, download the podcast. Wherever you get your favorite podcast, you'll find ours. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show.